Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. It's 1:30. If you can please come down and take a seat. We'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is, it's really exciting to see you all here, and we're looking forward to the session this afternoon. Just like to say a warm welcome to the Honorable Sashi Karan, who is a Fiji politician, a social entrepreneur, activist, who since December 2020 has served as the Fiji Assistant Minister for Women, Children, and Poverty Alleviation. She's the founder and former director of a nonprofit community organization known as the Foundation for Rural Integrated Enterprises and Development. And we all know that as FRIEND. Minister Karan has been a tireless champion for the vulnerable, marginalized communities in Fiji, and we're delighted to have her on the panel today. We're also joined by Ms. Lisa Bulatale from the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. She is the team leader for the Gender Justice Transitional Program. She's a positive, proactive can-do. She has a proactive can-do approach to life, and she's passionate about raising awareness, legal advocacy, addressing human rights, particularly in the areas of gender, governance, and disability. And we're also joined by Mr. Lemeki Thangilao, who is the Executive Director of Fiji National Council for Persons with Disabilities. And he's an outstanding advocate for the rights and capabilities for persons with disabilities. Now, I'll just emphasize that it's the rights and capabilities. He's a former civil servant, and he used to work for the Ministry of Labour. So he's going to bring some insights into the intricacies of the required recognition for care workers. Oh, by the way, this is about care work in Fiji, the care economy in Fiji. So it's such a pleasure to share the panel with such esteemed leaders. And if you didn't meet me last night, my name is Sandra Krausar. I'm the regional representative for the Asia Foundation. So this afternoon's panel, I'm going to make some introductory remarks, and then we're going to ask our panelists 3 questions each. And we're going to show a short video with the message about the care economy from the late Mr. Joshko Wakaniasi from the Pacific Disability Forum, who passed away earlier this year. And Joshko, along with Lisa, attended our Bali Care Economy dialogue that was held in parallel with the G20 in November last year. And then after that, we will open up for a round of questions. So the care economy. This isn't a new topic. The researchers concerned with gender equality have studied the care economy for decades. We have some rich analysis and some nuanced recommendations that highlight the pivotal yet undervalued and underprioritized economic role that care providers and care services play in the broader economy. And Ingrid Fitzgerald mentioned the care economy a number of times in her presentation this morning. The care economy represents diverse paid and unpaid work activities that provide direct care and indirect care for people who need support. So that's a broad range of activities there. It includes children, people with disabilities, and those who are elderly or sick. The provision of care includes self-care, because that's really important to support the people to function capably, comfortably, and safely. And that's a definition from the ILO. So it involves people who are being cared for, governments, the private sector. It's actually one of the fastest growing sectors around the world. Skills sector, CSOs, the faith-based organizations, it involves remittances, public financial management, and the list goes on. As we're all aware, COVID-19 revealed the fragility of our economy and the inability to provide a comprehensive response, particularly in our marginalized economies. Assistant Minister Karan was amid the responses in the distribution of food rations for families across Fiji. It was a vital response during the time of COVID. We saw the demand for care and the absence of the required infrastructure, including policies, facilities, and human resources to respond to those that needed care, the elderly, the sick, children, people with disabilities. Globally, care providers support over 1 billion people. And while some are paid for this work, most are women from marginalized backgrounds who are unpaid or poorly paid, and they lack the support that is needed to deliver high quality care to maintain healthy, inclusive societies. It's estimated that if the care work was decently remunerated, that it would be the third largest economy after the US and China. So investing in the care economy is actually imperative for inclusive and sustainable economic development, gender equality, broad-based social development to meet not only the SDGs, but also the 2050 Blue Pacific Continent strategy. So despite these pointers to the importance of the care economy actually remains underinvested, understudied, particularly among resource-constrained Asia-Pacific economies. Recent research conducted by the Asia Foundation's Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Program, which resulted in these policies here, and you can access them on the little barcode on this form here. They showed that 21 out of 58 countries in the Asia Pacific have one data point to measure unpaid care. And out of the 21 countries, 21 of those countries are actually based in the Asia region. So there's nothing in the Pacific at the moment. So in June 2022, TAF, my organization, the Asia Foundation, commenced a research dialogue on the care economy, producing a white paper and a roadmap alongside the global convening in November. And we are delighted that that Lysa can join us and bring some of the comments that she made there alongside Joshko. So today, that's globally, but today we're going to focus on Fiji because you can't treat the Pacific like a monolith. It's made up of diverse economies, diverse needs, and diverse like customs and structures. So let's start the conversation here. And without further ado, I'm going to say, we're going to start with our first questions. So the first question is relatively straightforward, and hopefully it's going to bring out some very, very interesting conversations. Madam Minister, what does the care economy mean to you, and what in your view should be a priority?
Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you so much for allowing me to be on this panel. I must say it's one of the most difficult conversations. I've been reading and looking and thinking about it, and I still don't have the answers. But for me, the care economy probably means everything. Where there is no care and no dignity, there is no productivity and no economy. In Fiji, I've been going over Professor Wadanarsi's reports, and he's been talking a lot about the unpaid work. He says 54% of all work in Fiji is unpaid. That may be including many other sectors. But considering that our children make up slightly higher than global average at about 28.9%, and our aging population has more than doubled in the last 50 years, most of the care is provided at homes and in our communities. 13%, 13.7% of our population live with some disability. And shockingly, let's add to that at least 3 amputations a day due to, in terms of disability due to diabetes alone, renal failure, strokes, other medical conditions. With limited medical care facilities, lack of rehabilitation facilities, or in aged care homes, there's heavy reliance on our community care that you spoke about in staggering trillions that contribute to the global economy. Community care for me is a strong backbone to making our economy, Fiji's economy, work. And at government level, while we provide social protection services and of course policy, there is a lot that needs to be done. You talked about self-care. In our context, in any community you go to, older women, grandmas have 2 to 3 children. During pandemic, I found out 4 children. In one case, I found one woman looking after 10 children and only one was hers. Because of the urban centers, many children from maritime and interior areas come to spaces where they can go to school, access employment, and so on. And there's massive overcrowding. So the pressure on individuals providing care is huge. All those people are diaspora who live abroad and send remittances, are contributing to this support and care economy. And the mental health and the drug challenges at the moment has provided an added dimension. In all the estate homes, I found that more than 50% of the residents are with mental health challenges, and we have no institution where they could go and get rehabilitated. So while we provide at the, at the government level, we have estates, we have poverty benefit schemes, 24,000 families are assisted by poverty benefit scheme, social pension scheme, 51,000 beneficiaries, care and protection allowance, 10,476 households, bus fare for old and disabled persons, 61,000 beneficiaries, disability allowance scheme, almost 12,000 beneficiaries, and food voucher program for rural pregnant mothers, 1,504 beneficiaries. There's also food voucher programs. So I think I'll stop there. That we are as a government, we are providing social protection. But when you think about care economy is so much larger, and there is a lot more work that I'll talk about later. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, on behalf of the disability sector in Fiji, I would like to take this time the Asia Foundation for inviting us to be part of this panel. As you've mentioned earlier about the late Mr. Josko Wakaniasi, he was one of the champion this particular in this care economy for persons with disabilities in Fiji. And I would like to acknowledge his work and whatever that he has done for persons with disabilities in Fiji and also to in the Pacific. Well, the care economy is in a very important aspect. I'll just talk on the persons with a disability context. Care economy is very important in especially for persons with disabilities. It is an economic and social framework that recognize the values and the importance of care work in society. As you know that different disabilities have different needs, and care is very important for people to take care of persons with disabilities. So the concept highlights the significance of caregiving in maintaining the well-being, promoting social cohesion, and fostering economic growth. So in terms of priorities, I believe the first point or the first idea is to recognize the recognition of the unpaid care work. If you look around, like for the unpaid care work for persons with disabilities in Fiji, they are mostly our families, family members, and also our friends, because of their compassion and also they'll, because it's our family members. So we tend to take up that role, that very important role in taking care of persons with disabilities in Fiji, in their respective families. So this is a component, it is a significant component of supporting individuals with disabilities. So prioritizing this care economy means acknowledging the value of this work and ensuring that caregivers receive adequate support, respite, and recognition for their efforts. The second point that I would like to raise is enhancing professional caregiving services. There are some caregiving services that are already out there, professional caregiving services. So like this, for example, like disability support workers, therapists in all areas, whether physical, whether emotional. Then we also have our nurses who plays a vital role in supporting persons with disabilities. So in prioritizing this area, I believe that they need to be trained, that we need to invest in the training and the professional development and fair compensation for those caregivers. As I've mentioned in my first point, that most of these care workers are not paid, and they are just friends and also family members. So if they could be compensated, and also professional development and fair compensation of these caregivers. And when we also look at on job stability, if you look at the trend in Fiji currently, I think in the Pacific also, if you look at the trend now, like most of our caregivers, there are institutions in Fiji that have that are training them. For example, APTC, and there are some local institution that has been training them. And most of these care workers, when they get the certificates, they tend to go abroad. So what we would like to see is that if we can, in order to support persons with a disability, if we can promote job stability and decent working conditions for these caregivers, so that we can attract and retain this skilled professional. Another point can be the accessible and affordable care services. The availability of accessible and affordable care services for persons with disabilities or any other in this in terms of care. They need to access the necessary support, therapies, the assistive technologies for them to participate fully in society. So it also includes breaking down those barriers, like in terms of transportation, accessible transportation, accessible buildings that hinders to their for them for accessing the service. Just for example, like we have services for persons with disabilities. We have services out there in the hospital. Take for example, for healthcare, going to the hospital. Sometimes for a wheelchair user coming into the hospital, but because of the infrastructure, they could not access that service. So that is where a carer comes in to assist that particular person to access that. So it's very important that we look at these two points, so that persons with disabilities or any other people can access that health care, and at the same time be affordable. Affordable. I remember just in terms of assistive devices. For assistive devices, we're so thankful to our development partners, our donors, who are out there that have provided assistive device and mobility device free for persons with disability or any other persons in Fiji that needs those mobility devices. And to get a wheelchair is a bit expensive for a person with a disability. So I think it's important if we can have like to look at the cost of those mobility devices and how best we can work out so that persons with disability can afford and can also access those kind of care service. Well, I'm told to speak only 2 or 3, But the other points that I can raise is about the caregiver well-being and mental health. You understand that a caregiver can be very, at times, because looking after persons with disabilities, for example, for us, take for example a caregiver at the St. Charles Hospital for persons with disability at a psychosocial. We need to look at them, their well-being, because sometimes it can affect them. So those are some of the areas that we can look into in terms of this care economy. And maybe the last thing in terms of policy, inclusion policies that can come in. But I'm so thankful to the government for especially in Fiji, we have different inclusive policies that are out there in the respective ministries. For example, in the Ministry of Education, we have inclusive education policy. Ministry of Youth and Sports, we have this inclusive sports policy, and also in the Ministry of Housing. Currently, the government is reviewing the Fiji building code. So these are the things that all comes in to support this care economy. Nak.
Test. Thank you, Sandra, and the team from Asia Foundation for inviting the Fiji Women's Rights Movement to make our comments around such a key and important area around care work and the care economy. So my contributions this morning is this afternoon, sorry, in that capacity as from the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. So I have 3 points, but I'll be very brief because I know you have a time limit. Women's rights organizations in Fiji particularly have, been at the forefront of pushing for the recognition, the reduction and redistribution of care work for decades. So if you look at the distribution of unpaid care work in Fiji, the statistics from the show that women do majority of the unpaid care work. And when you compare that to paid work, women are at 34% in terms of their contribution to the paid economy. And the Fiji Country Gender Assessment Report that was also launched by the Ministry of Women, Children Poverty Alleviation, it also shows women doing majority of the unpaid care work in their families as compared to men. And then when you put global pandemic or natural disasters, it just further exacerbates women's care burden in the home. And evidence of this shows in the last COVID where women did majority of the unpaid care work. So for us at FWRM, our work around care work begins from this lensing, right? So if the majority of women are spending a lot of time, doing unpaid care work, how do you then mitigate that? Or how do you create opportunities for women? And so for us, we've started looking at the area around older women more closely, because if you look at global and regional statistics, it indicates that there's a growing aging population. That is, people are living longer beyond their 60s. And I think one of the statistics from the UN agencies is 1 in 6 people in the world will reach the age of 65 years or over by the year 2050. And so if you look at the Pacific context, similar trend is also predicted. But then if you also look at the trends data of that, you see that a lot of older women or women are projected to outlive men. So with that in mind, for the work that we do, we then look at, well, what are the socio-economic and human rights issues that need law, policy, or program interventions for older women? So that's the context that we came in when we started looking at care work and the care economy. So now, because FWRM is a legislative reform, lobbying, advocacy type of organization, we did an assessment of global and national commitments on aging women and poverty. Poverty, why? Because a lot of older women were experiencing, different types of poverty. Whereas, when they retired, a lot of older women did not have retirement money by the time they reached retirement age, because the majority of it was spent on, paying off mortgages and loan. So we looked at global and national commitments, and there's a lot of commitments that the government has committed to, but I think perhaps one of the most relevant one that I think is important in this conversation around care work is looking at the Madrid International Platform of Action on Aging. Now I'll go into the boring part of explaining what it exactly it is, but basically it's a policy framework that looks at older persons and making sure that they have, affordable healthcare, social and financial security, accessible healthcare services and work, so that they can live a longer life and live with dignity, because they were recognizing that, a lot of people will grow old and they would need those types of policy interventions. And for Fiji, we did ratify and we did sign the Madrid International Platform of Action in 2002, but our implementation and compliance have been poor. So with this whole conversation around care work, which is largely driven by the aging population, majority of it being older women, and I think that this commitment in itself should be at the very heart of the conversation when we are thinking about how do we develop, how do we strengthen the care economy in Fiji. At least we have some sort of policy that provides that sort of framing, because we can do a lot of policy, we can do a lot of programs and interventions around care work, but when it's driven also by global commitments and buy-in by the Fiji government, then it then protects, it safeguards certain interlinked issues that certain vulnerable groups would face, like older women. So in terms of our contribution in the whole care economy, which is the first question that Sandra asked, I think that's the capacity that we bring in. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So now we've taken the lid off the box called the care economy, and you can see how complicated it is underneath. It's like a box of spaghetti and there's just lines going everywhere. So, okay, we're going to go into, so it was a relatively simple question, wasn't it? And we got quite a complicated set of answers. So we're going to go on to the second question, which is a statement really that care makes everything work. The care economy underpins all the other parts of the economy, and it underpins the way we live our lives. And a resilient care infrastructure will enable everyone to live lives with dignity. So Minister, we'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, like I said, it's extremely complex. There's a lot that needs to happen to create enabling spaces. At some levels, we are in discussions, very difficult discussions on how to create accessible transportation for older persons, while we were providing money for transportation for older persons. We realized many of them can't use the bus services. And what does it mean for them to come to the hospital? We are very aware that people living with disabilities in interior areas, for them to come to town is more than $150 one way just to come to the hospital. And how many of them are unable to afford it? Because the transportation allowance doesn't do it. And what does transport look like? And how do you support them in a way that actually reaches them? So these are some of the hard conversations we're already having. People living with disability, it's surprising to see there are not a lot of parking spaces anywhere in any of the towns for either older persons or people living with disabilities. So that's another conversation in the last few months we've been having. So there's a lot that needs to be thought through for some of these enabling work to happen. We know our medical services are struggling with infrastructure, but we do know that there is need for geriatric care, and there has been a lot of call for having geriatric wards. There is need for disability care. People coming with disability cannot access the facilities. And if the hospital does not have lift working, very basic, everywhere it stays. And many times we see that they're not able to access services. I've been asked outright in some of the meetings that I've gone to recently, what about postpartum counseling care? One of the women in a workspace said to me that she's been struggling with it, and thankfully her workplace was very supportive, but she couldn't find the right kind of counseling care or support network for postpartum. And the effect that it's having on, in productivity in her workforce, which is largely women. Actually, one of the tourism industry, networks that I was talking to. Physiotherapy basics for people living with disability. Easy access to mobility aid has been talked about. But the mobility aid assistive devices that come are not necessarily made for Fiji. They're made for different contexts. So many of those wheelchairs that come in, you take it out, they're so thin that they get damaged easily. There's no way you can really take it for repair. We've also seen that some of the devices that come are broken, and because people end up using it, their posture changes. So where is the support for all that? I would say that in order to create enabling spaces, yes, we need a whole of government approach, but more than that, we need a whole of society approach. We need conscious corporate, we need conscious communities. And one of the things that's absolutely heartbreaking that I saw in my past work is the taboo around many of the disabilities or the vulnerabilities. For example, older women not being able to have access to their own homes when they become widow. Many of them, lose their homes, or their challenges of property. One thing that absolutely has been mind-boggling to me is I've seen people living with disability crawl on their knee, so amputated, but actually having to crawl to go to toilet or water in a village context. No support for bars and all that. And there's this whole taboo around, if you're disabled or you're in a vulnerable situation, it's because you deserve it or because of your deeds. So while we are great caregivers in a global economy and in paid work, I've seen, lack in our own communities being able to provide support for people living in disability, and having to talk to women's group and church groups to try and provide respite to some of the people who are struggling with care alone in the household. So dealing with culture. And then there are very difficult conversations around other topics like mental health. I was very surprised to find that 25 people rehabilitated at St. Giles over the last 10 years had nowhere to go. Still have nowhere to go. So they've been rehabilitated, but their families won't take them back. And we know as our society is breaking and people are migrating and, there's so much movement, there is, the care spaces are shrinking, or people who are able to take care are shrinking. And we've been having this conversation, and this is a difficult one. How do you provide incentives or support to people who are providing care? Because many of them are not able to go out and earn because they have a member of, of family who is compromised, or because they're not able to earn income. We've come across situations where, they'll be maybe washed and cleaned, provided food in the day, and left alone. And then, the person goes off to work to find some money and support. How do we come as a whole of society, community organizations, corporates, government, different networks? We're not that big a population. So there needs to be, much more conversations around this and thinking, how do we actually come together to be able to do more? I'll stop there. I know we have time limitation. But these are very difficult conversations. And having seen these kind of vulnerabilities, and I've had a few meetings with people living with the Pacific Disabled People's Association, and we are now every day thinking it through. I've had meetings with the special schools and the struggles of parents and teachers and the lack of support, and how do we provide that support? It's it's not difficult thing to do, but I think we need much more conversations and clear pathways and being able to do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, yeah, makes everything okay. It emphasized the crucial role of a resilient care infrastructure in enable persons with disabilities to live with dignity. So some of the areas that we would like to explore on support and assistance. This can include care tenants, therapists, the assistive technologies, accessible transportation, and more. So by providing these resources, these essential resources, care infrastructure can ensure that the persons with disabilities have the necessary support and assistance to carry out the activities of daily life, living, and participate fully in society. We can also look at the independence and autonomy. When we empower persons with disabilities, this is an area that we would like to look at in terms of independence and autonomy. So a resilient care infrastructure promotes this independence and autonomy for persons with disability. So it recognizes that persons with disabilities have unique needs and abilities and strives to create an inclusive environment that allows them to exercise control over their lives. So this can be achieved through accessible housing, employment opportunities, education, community-based support services that empowers them to make choices and lead self-determined lives. The other thing can be social inclusion and equality. Promoting equality for persons with disabilities. As I've mentioned earlier, the opportunities for accessible environments, inclusive education, and equal employment opportunities. It helps to remove barriers that may prevent people with disabilities from fully participating in society. So in terms of the resilient care infrastructure, it recognizes the rights and the inherent dignity of persons with disabilities, promoting a society where they are valued and included. The other two that I would not elaborate more on that is the health and well-being. And the other one is the advocacy and empowerment. Those are some of the areas that can be incorporated into this care infrastructure so that persons with disability can be looked after. Vinaka.
Yep, I think from my end, in terms of what an enabling environment should look like, just have 3 points. One is understanding context. Fiji and the Pacific region is patriarchal, right? In terms of its norms, its values, and this has seeped into institutional structures and even the economy. And the manifestation of this is seen where women's economic empowerment and the participation to the labor market is poorly represented. And it's influenced by social and cultural norms as well. So I think that when we are talking about care economy and that enabling environment, we must see this types of lensing as well and consider the context when we are building an enabling environment. So where we are right now, and when we look at the care model, it foresees women taking on care responsibilities of the family, the children, and the elderly. So when we have this conversation of when we want to put women, majority of women, into care work, it's making sure that we also understand that our society and our economy is very patriarchal, and making sure that we don't actually add more burden to women who do this type of work. My next point is including women's voices. Where is that element of choice for women? Because the care economy is driven by aging population, majority of it being older women, is it even their choice to do care work? Where is the voice of older women and their choice when we're talking about that? Is venturing into care work something older women even want? Is it something that they want? Sandra had alluded to a work that we've been doing with Asia Foundation, looking at the future of work for older women in the Pacific region. So we hope that that report could be out soon. And so, sorry. And, you know, we had a survey even done in Samoa, and they said, we don't want to do care work. We've been doing that majority of our lives. So why would we want to do more work around that area? So it's making sure that while we talk about this conversation, that women are at the central part. What do they actually want? What do all the women want? Maybe they want to do more on business. Maybe they don't want to do anything around care work. So it's finding out what is the actual need as well before we even go into that conversation. The last thing that I also wanted to talk about is care data. For us at FWM, any advocacy ask that we lobby for government, it has to be rooted or grounded on evidence-based analysis and data. And so one of my reflections from the Bali Care Dialogue that I attended last year is that, you know, and it's very cliche of an NGO to always say this, but we don't have data. The data is very limited when we're talking about the care economy in the Pacific. There's a lot of retired older women that are going into care work in Australia and also in America, but they're undocumented. So what is, you know, the situation like for them? And where they are at right now, we don't know their working conditions or the skill set that they have for the job. A lot of older women are just doing that. So it's looking at that. But to be able to analyze that and to build the infrastructure around care work in Fiji, it requires that type of data. And I think that's something that we don't have in the Pacific. And I was kind of a bit disgruntled when I went to Bali and they were putting all this beautiful data from the Asia Pacific. And then I was like, okay, where's the Pacific? And Josco was there as well. And we had the same sentiments, is that, oh, we're talking about shifting into the care economy, but we don't even have data from our own Pacific region. So maybe that's another research point for other big organizations that have a bit more resources to do work around this. So I think in terms of enabling environment, those are the three things. Understand your context when you're building something like this. Ensure that women's voices are at the very heart of the conversation when you're building, and then have your data to know that, oh, what exactly are the trends and what exactly are the gaps. Yeah.
Thanks, Liza. Okay, so we've unpacked the box. We're taking down the sides now and letting it all spill out. If we're going to take that analogy a little bit further. So the importance of having these conversations so we can actually note the importance of autonomy, independence, dignity, agency, data, voice, need. These are all starting to come into play. So now, before we go into the third question, we're going to take a moment to remember Mr. Joshko Wakaniasi, who we recognize as a champion for persons with disabilities and the care economy. And as Lisa said, he was part of our Bali Care Economy dialogue in November last year. So we're just going to play a short video of him reflecting on what the event was and his major thoughts. So thank you. So I apologize as well if this is triggering for anybody. Please take care. You're welcome if you feel uncomfortable to leave the room, but we'd just like to honor his work. Thank you.
Happy New Year and warm Pacific greetings. Colleagues, donors, partners, relevant stakeholders, and friends. Acknowledging the invitation and grateful for the opportunity to participate. The Bali Care Dialogue was truly an eye-opener and remarkable learning and networking platform, considering the diversity of the region, whether it be resources or lack thereof, legislation and procedures or gaps within these, support systems and support services, which the Disability Forum and its 47 member organizations across 22 Pacific countries and territories. Language to define disability care is a precondition for meaningful and participatory inclusion of persons with disabilities. While the Pacific is rich in culture and heritage, for generations resulting from extended family settings, especially in villages and rural communities, support and care 2 and 4 persons with disabilities have always been at the mercy and responsibility of family with limited no support from beyond their families or communities in which they live. While there has been progress in some of the Pacific countries with social protection systems and schemes, many of these currently have a one-size-fits-all structure and is determined by the individual's incapacity to work as a criteria for support. Further to this, it is assessed on the individual with disability, mostly without the consideration of cost of care resulting in the support person or carer not receiving any recognition, including remuneration for their contribution of support or care. Guided by the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, or UNCRPD in short, PDF and its members have strengthened and continue to build advocacy towards realization of rights of persons with disabilities. In order to have an appropriate support system and scheme, it is crucial that the target beneficiaries are consulted and actively participate throughout the process, including planning, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. The social protection system and scheme is one such initiative that, if well structured, can leverage and springboard towards an appropriate, cost-effective, affordable, and quality disability care system. It needs consideration for gender sensitivity, age appropriateness, and impairment grouping as part of the design. It needs to address from a disability extra cost perspective, as they may include assisted device as a cost that needs to be subsidized, making it more affordable. Cost for support person or carers in consideration of the disability grouping and the severity of the impairment. This individual should also be able to qualify to other mainstream social protection schemes and its purpose, like any other person without disability. It is also important for partnerships with other civil society organizations across the region and globally for learning, information, and data sharing. This includes consultative and collaborative engagements, such as the recent Bali Care Dialogue. Outcomes of these collaborative efforts, such as the white paper, is a push in the right direction for appropriate and needed change from the current non-recognizing discriminative norms. Thank you for listening. Vanakkam.
A passionate and very articulate advocate for people with disabilities and for the care economy. So we just honor his work. Thank you. Okay, so we're coming to the last question, which is really that we understand now that there's actually a lot to be done. We'd like to ask the panelists, what would you identify as the next steps to move the needle in Fiji and perhaps the Pacific region, but let's focus on Fiji really, to improve the care infrastructure, gender parity, and the recognition of the care support and services? How will you move the needle, Minister?
Well, thank you for bringing in Joshko in the conversation and acknowledging his work. I've had a couple of meetings with the Pacific Disability Forum and him and the Fiji Disabled People's Association. Something that he said, and it's a conversation that's a hard one, but we've been having it. How do we provide support to caregivers? How much do you provide? What's relevant in a country of 10 billion debt? How do you provide support for their medication and some of the very difficult needs? And we've needed people like him who have, really have been challenging a lot of these conversations. So thank you for that. I think, how do we move the needle? One mega issue challenge that needs to happen is an attitudinal change. First of all, we need to acknowledge that we have an issue. We need to remove our judgmental frames. All of us talk about faith and how we should not judge and, we should support. Fiji is a very loving and caring nation once we remove the lenses of, oh, they're like that because maybe they deserve it. So I think there needs to be a shift in society change. Government needs to do its part. Yes, not only enabling policies, but social protection and, a lot of the other things that are being worked on. But I think we all, as a whole of society, need to think through some of these things. One simple thing that I can think of, and I've talked to the forum about it, is a call response center. And that'll help with the data, but simply having helplines for people living with disabilities, they're able to call and talk about whether they need to talk, just talk, or social support, or transportation, or diapers, or medical support, report abuse. The vulnerable are the ones that are most abused as well. We've talked to the forum and the Disability Association about, let's put together, we know the needs, who are the caregivers? So we know there are many caregivers, some have specific assistive devices, some have diapers, some have, what do they have? But if somebody needs something in Boa or in Lao, very specific item needed, who do they call? We don't have that at the moment. We have a directory, but we do not have a directory of specific services. And there is an urgency, and we've been having this conversation for the last few months, is let's have that. And then let's see, for example, if an organization is able to provide people living with disability assistive devices or diapers or something very specific, and they run out of it, then they know how to raise money or who to go to make sure that they have it. How do we work with the government to make sure they have substituted or, they have assistance in being able to access that? So I think we can make take these simple steps. While we have policies that needs to be worked on and are being looked at, how do we take that one simple action? Let's look at maybe helplines. And helplines, as easily said, is not easy to provide. We need the right languages available. We need the counseling services available. When somebody is asked with something, we need to be responsive. So how do we make sure that we have an infrastructure that people are provided the services? We know there are 13,000 people living with disabilities, plus, so many more with amputations. We know our elder population is what, 13,000? So we know the numbers. How do we start and then support and then provide a support structure around it to be able to provide that? So maybe I will start there. Something basic, not simple, quite complex, but needs to be done. And that'll help us with data. It'll help us with understanding the needs better and being able to look at policies and maybe infrastructure in a better way to be able to get there, hopefully sooner than groping in the dark. Thank you.
Thank you. By the Honorable Minister, in terms of the data collection and research, that is very important. That is a way forward, especially for Fiji, in terms of collecting the correct data. I think in the last census, Fiji has about 13.7% for in Fiji for persons living with disabilities. Yes, 131,000. 131,000. So that was back then, but I think now it will be more. So we need to have this in place, data collection, and we are so thankful to some of our partners who are coming in today. We were just having a meeting. discussion, a meeting with the defense facilities in terms of establishing a national database for persons with disability in Fiji. So that will really assist. I think we need to collaborate more and partnership. The stakeholders have been to come together. For example, what Madam Minister was discussing in terms of the service provided, that we need to map it out, which people are doing that service, and that is something that we've been trying to do from these few months, and for sure that we will about to complete it. And also in terms of in Fiji, in terms of policy and legal reforms, but we are so thankful that Fiji, I think Fiji compared to the Pacific, is really taking a lead role in terms of policy and legal reforms. Fiji has, in 2017, Fiji ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Again, in 2018, we have an act that repealed the 1994 Fiji National Council for Disabled Persons Act, which is now the Rights of Persons with a Disability Act. And we have an implementation plan and also a strategic plan, which comes to the end this year. So that in terms of policy, as I've mentioned earlier, that we have other inclusive policies that are out there in terms of education, in terms of housing, for training, especially in education. What we have seen in education to have that pathways from, we have special schools and we are going now into the mainstream school to be inclusive. So we have to have the pathways from the primary school to the secondary school in terms of the curriculum, then to the vocational. And the support should be there in terms of the reasonable accommodations. And when it comes to the university level, we are so thankful for these two institutions, the University of Fiji and the Fiji National University. I would like to commend you for your support towards persons with disabilities in the Pacific. In terms of having a disability support center, resource center, disability resource center, that are there to support the persons with disability coming into the institution. Through the government, we have 20 spaces for persons with disabilities who can have scholarship to come into this institution. And again, we are focusing on this skills training when it comes to, do you understand that persons with disabilities, they have challenges in terms of literacy and numeracy. So that is where skills training is very important. We would like to thank the government for reviving this TVET program, because that is a support mechanism for persons with disabilities so that they can access that higher education, and also for them to have a independent life. They can have some have their own business, and can also have some other things for them to do in life. So that is on policies and legal reforms. Some that I have already shared is to investment in the care services, capacity building and training efforts. You know, we look into all those areas, especially for persons, for the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. We have advisory committees on education, on vocational, on housing, on infrastructure, on transportation, and also on sports, education, and women with disabilities. Sorry, that is also an area that we have to look into, onto the empowering women with the disabilities. That is an area to take away this gender disparity. First of all, they are women, women, and again, if they are women with disabilities, so we have to support them through economic empowerments, give them skills training, so that they can have their sustained livelihood. So that is some of the areas that is very practical that we can move forward apart from at that national level in terms of policies and in terms of policies. So I believe that implementing these steps, I think Fiji and the Pacific region can make significant progress in improving care infrastructure and promoting gender equity and recognizing the importance of care support and services for individuals with disabilities. And it requires a collaborative and multi-phase approach involving various stakeholders to create an inclusive and equitable society for all. Inaka.
Yep, just from my end, I think 3 points. One is on compliance. It's strengthening our commitment and implementation of the Madrid International Platform of Action for Aging. That's just to ensure the protection of older women when we are talking about, the future of work for them and the care economy. I think that we also must ensure that when we're building the care infrastructure in Fiji and in the Pacific, that the key stakeholders are within the legal frameworks, right? And then the investments and interventions made are also gender responsive. I think having government buy-in and commitment towards the care economy kind of safeguards us. Because there's that, always that, I don't want to say threat, but I don't have a better word. But when you privatize services, then it becomes, not everyone has the money to be able to afford private care facilities. So when you have government buy-in, it safeguards that. I think for us as a feminist organization, it's including women. It's making sure that women are there at every level when you're talking about the care work. So making sure that their voices are articulated in the types of interventions and policy programs that we want to do as a country. And I think my other panelists speakers have also talked about this. It's making sure that we have the data. I think with the fast increasing demand for care services, especially now with older women going into care work, but undocumented, there's a severe gap in policy planning. And it just highlights the need for us to invest in care data to inform better care policies. So these types of data can include, paid and unpaid, formal and informal care workers, their working conditions and skill set. And that's something that's lacking. I think those are just my 3 points to add.
Thank you very much. Is that working now? Yes. So another wide-ranging views on how we can shift the needle. I think Lemeki, you had a whole sewing kit in there of things that you wanted to shift the needle on. But I think it's really important that we do have the buy-in from the government, from the service providers, from the people who are enabling the voice of people in the care economy, both the recipients, the caregivers, the people who are potentially profiting off it, because that is coming. So thank you. So the support for the caregivers was a really excellent point as well. Thank you. The attitudinal change, that's going to take some time. So we can work on that. But what we have here really is just such a complicated system to be working through. And as I said before, the care economy makes the rest of the economy work. It makes our society work. So this also calls for collective action. It's going to be tough doing this. This is going to have to be everyone doing it. All we've done is convened a panel. There was an excellent panel last week convened by Oxfam on the care economy, on paid and unpaid work and women in fisheries, with women in fisheries not being able to participate in economic empowerment activities because they were caring for their family. So it means that that is the income foregone, which keeps them in a position of poverty themselves. So I think what we're going to do now is we have about 25 minutes for comments. So we might open it up, but I'm just going to point out to the screen, because we're trying to be as green as possible and not print out many publications. If you want to access the documents that we're talking about from the Bali Care Economy, you can use your little QR code on this postcard. And if you want a quick snapshot about what the recommendations were, the key insights from the Care Economy dialogue, it's on the back of the card. So you can take that there. So instead of printing out a whole report for everyone, you can have a look at it online and we can save some trees. So I'm now going to open this up to the floor for questions, and we'll take 2 questions, I think, first, and then we'll go on to the next set of questions. Thank you. And I have
Hi, sorry, Sadhna Sen. I'm no expert in this area, but over the last 6 months, I've had to become an expert because I'm a caregiver for a 76-year-old mother who's also taking care of a bedridden 84-year-old father. No help from government, don't expect any help from government. We're doing it on our own. And the vast majority of those who have elderly people and disabled persons in families in Fiji take care of their own and don't necessarily look out to government to take care of things. But I've got suggestions for a few interventions that's not necessarily going to cost too much, which the panel may want to consider and the minister may want to take on board, given that we've got a budget coming up next month and we've got a tax review going on currently. Okay. Access to APTC and Sangam trained caregivers, a database of those seeking work in this area in Fiji may be available through Employment Center. It's difficult finding caregivers, but we know that there are trained people. It'd be good to have a database of these people. Duty concession of adult diapers and pants, which cost $30 for 6 pence. Imagine a poor person paying $30 for 6 pence for a week. Duty concessions or tax rebates on mobility devices, which our friend from the Disability Forum spoke about. Don't expect government to pay for it. We can buy it ourselves, but the prices are disgustingly high, criminally high. Tax rebates for family members who work full-time and take care of elderly persons with disabilities. This is a forum organized by Deaf Policy, and I know Australia, or in Canberra at least, they've got a really great caregiving, what do you call it, Ryan? Support service with regards to tax concessions and things like that, and rebates and things like that. You may want to talk to some deaf policy economists who don't have anything better to do. Support for spouse and family members who take care of the above. Break day centers where the elderly can meet once a month, week for medical checkups, shared chai with organized activities that put some happiness, dignity into their life outside of their bedrooms. Support with safe access in homes and the ability to be able to buy these things, just at your normal hardware store, like rails, ramps, those kind of things. Sorry.
We'll just take one more. And then we'll go to the panel. And we had a question up here. Okay. A second question?
Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. My question goes to the Minister. Minister, all I've been hearing in this forum is about that you've been having a lot of conversations about the services and wraparound services that is required in the disability sector and everything else. My question is the previous government that has already been in place, what sort of services have they put in place and what are you doing about it to improve those services? Is there any services that are already in place? Like we just heard that there are no services available as far as the government is concerned. So where are we? What are we doing about it? And is there in the budget that is coming up, is there anything allocated for the disability services for that matter? Thank you.
there are a lot of services available. So we can't say that there's no services available. And I think it's been already discussed, and I'll ask my colleague here to share the number of things that are happening. Sadhna, the text conversation is, I mean, it's something that we are proposing. We can't promise it'll happen right away because there's a lot of research going around in that, but those conversations have already happened.
The price of adult diapers from $30 for 6 diapers to
That's something that we have requested for. When I talk about research, it's also negotiating with the companies and looking at what is causing those price hikes. So that's something that we've already asked for in text review. Grills, ramps, these are some of the things. And like I said, disability parking, all that, we are already asking. We don't know whether it can happen so quickly in this budget, but it's something that we are lobbying for it to happen. Aged care facilities, we have very compromised and full aged care facilities. And they are, it's hard for me to just tell you all the things that are happening, but there are conversations around building more of these facilities. Daycare facility has already been made arrangements with in the vulnerable extension. There is a daycare facility. In Lotoka, as the construction plans are happening, there is daycare facility in respite being planned. So we are talking to the Disability Forum and Fiji Disabled People's Association. And whatever we can do right away, remember we've just been there 5-6 months right now, we are trying to take it on board. But some of the work will take much longer. Like we are talking to corporate already about disability parking, express lanes for people, for older people, for people living with disability. We are talking about how do you provide support to caregivers, because if, there are lots of people who are providing care for the older persons and disability. But some of this needs much bigger work because policies have implications, not only dollar value implications, but has implications on all the stakeholders in the mix. So we cannot simply just bulldoze things. There are consultations that are happening and some things may be visible right soon and some things may not be visible for some time. But that's a conversation he can confirm that we've been having for the last 6 months on what are the things that we need to do to be more enabling. And that's why one of the conversations we are preparing to have is a service providers list. So people in, say, Mbua want diapers, they can't afford it. How do we mobilize it? How do we mobilize assistive devices? Because there are lots of people in different places who can't afford it. How do we provide a call center so we understand, say, so your parent needs this support. We start getting not only data, but also we provide, how do we provide support that somebody in Lotoka or calling in from Ra gets the support they need and within the timeliness. And that's what I think I'll pass the phone to you, pass the mic to you because it's a conversation and planning we've been having with the team. We're not discussed it.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Okay, in terms of the services, there are services out there, but it's important to, for example, speaking from this disability perspective, it's important to come to the disability, what can I say? There are different associations and different groups of disabilities that are out there. They can come and talk. You can come to the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, or we can discuss after this if you need more information, because there are certain assistance that are provided. For us at the disability associations, the OPDs, we call them the OPDs, Organizations for Persons with Disabilities. This is according to their impairments, for the deaf, for visual impairment, for psychosocial, for wheelchair users in terms of physical and other disabilities. So they have, as I've mentioned earlier, they have different disabilities or different challenges. They have different needs. So that is why they stay in their own impairments, and they gave out assistance. So as has been mentioned by the Honorable Minister, that we are working now on these the services that we need to identify who does what and what they provide so that we can reach out to the communities. But there are services there. So for example, in your case, ma'am, you need diapers. We also provide diapers at the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. So if that is what I said, if you reach out to these disability service providers, then you will understand, then they will know what other types of services that they provide. We give it for free, ma'am. We give it for free. We don't charge any fee. We give it for free, but it depends on the donors, the ones that they give it to us. So the services are already there. So you can, we just have to strengthen and enhance those kind of services.
Thank you, panelists, for the excellent presentation. I'm Vilhelm Kastawanga from the University of Malta. Just a point in terms of economic opportunities for those living with disabilities. A clear case is at the National Council of People of Disability. There's a group that are doing car wash. And that's an excellent sort of work that is happening in terms of allowing them to have economic means. They even do water catchment in terms of sustainability. So one of the thought was like, how can we open up more of such small, medium enterprise work for such people? And what are some of the opportunities that can be helped? Because really those are some kind of the positive things that is happening in the community. And then they were even working through during COVID. So this is some of the positive that's happening in society. Thank you.
Thank you. I personally have asked Fiji Development Bank, because they provide this micro enterprise for women, whether they can look at people living with disabilities and the other vulnerable people, and that's something they said they'll look into. We have asked for because like it's been shared, different people with disability have different needs and different abilities. So we're trying to assess which, for example, people with right support and protection to soft work. People on wheels, not necessarily. So we're trying to understand, and then through TVET, provide the different training needed and provide micro enterprise support needed to be able to get them into livelihoods. And one of the things that was discussed with us was, instead of, while we ask the mainstream corporate to try and get them into employment, it's easier for many people living with disabilities to have their own enterprise because they can do it with their challenges, like they can rest if they need it. If the days they're not feeling well, they can still do the different things that they can and have a market support in production that doesn't really inconvenience them as well. So it's something, again, we have been talking, it sounds like a lot of talking, but it's a lot of consultations that are happening around it. And we're trying to find services that we are able to provide for people living with disabilities through the different OPDs. We've had, I think, 3 meetings with the different OPDs. And it's not easy because we are conversing and then they're supposed to assess and create the data. And then we are planning. So it's taking time. Like I said, it's only been 5 or 6 months for us to be working in this space at the national level, at least for me in this space. Thank you.
Sorry, I have a question. I think this question is an add-on to the question that was asked earlier. This is in terms of, how sustainable are the mechanisms that the government has been putting in place in terms of the, a lot of the disabilities, people living with disabilities in local communities, in the informal settlements. They're kind of like they're left out within the discussions of disability and, the kind of support and the resources they're receiving. My question is, how do you think that the past government was the mechanisms that were in place was effective than what you guys are currently doing in now?
And one more question, so we'll just take another one. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, my name is Yone. I'm from the Economic Discipline School of Accounting, Finance, Economics from USP. I think this is a good discussion. We start talking about looking at this as an industry, as the caregiving. It's a very lucrative industry, especially overseas. My question is, what do you think, especially the Associate Minister? We tend to privatize everything now. I mean, to rely on government to provide services is too much. What do you think of privatizing? Give out to the public to run aged care giving centers. And I think my friend Craig here will be very happy because a private aged care facility or company will do a better job. They will be able to maybe pay higher wages for those who will be caregiving, who will be involved, they will employ. So the question is, what do you think of? Is there a solution? I mean, is that will be one of the solution or option to privatize? I mean, give it to the private sector and the government to support. By it for all my been here in Fiji I'm from Tonga, but been here in Fiji for almost 22 years. My wife is a caregiver. She can easily go to Australia, but I told you, wait, the government will privatize, then you go and work for them. But anyway, only for so far, for 21 years, it's just that I think last month I saw one lady was a nurse. She's starting aged care business. So that's my thinking. And we can also privatize the ambulance services. It's too controlled by St. John and looking at privatization. What's your view on that,
Sure,
Honorable
thank you.
Minister?
There are investors interested and they will invest and provide aged care, and that goes through the investment process. As a government, we'll always have aged care because not everybody will be able to afford private. Having said that, there are many other players that have come in and we're grateful. So St. Vincent de Paul has a home and now has also a shelter for people living on streets. Heart Home, where they found that a lot of older people at Heart Home could not look after themselves, have created nursing homes within the Heart Home. So there are many players coming in because the need has gone, it's a very visible and a need. So yes, it is a sector where many players can come in depending on who's interested in investment, but government will still play its role. Rural outreaches, I was just asking because there are different OPDs. So there, for example, Fiji Disabled People's Association, there's Western Disabled People's Association. So they work through the different networks to try and have support provided to people living with disabilities. I'll just tell you my experience having in my past life, in my past work, is generally I find people who are born with disabilities are registered and are able to reach out and seek support in many of the cases that I've seen. People who get disabled due to amputations and strokes are the ones that are not really listed. So they get physiotherapy support and they get discharged. And they, I find, generally are not the ones who are on any database or any support system. Village health workers have a record of who are the people living with disabilities in the community, and they work with Ministry of Health or other NGOs in trying to provide support. Squatters, some through their Turani Koros are able to reach out and some not. So that is a real challenge in trying to reach out to people living with disabilities, especially in very remote communities. And it's something that we need to work on.
Thank you for the services provided to the community, in terms of those small business enterprise. As mentioned by the Honorable Minister, we have the OPDs, and also with the National Council, we provide them with training. We train the communities in terms of skills, and then after training, the government has the economic empowerment budget through the Ministry of Women, Children, and Poverty Alleviation. So from those trainings, then they can also apply direct to the, for example, like any financial institution like Fiji Development Bank, and the support is there from these different OPDs in terms of monitoring and evaluating their businesses. But that is an area too that we would like to strengthen, in terms of empowerment, because we want to move out from this, what can I say, this giving, these handouts, and try to empower them so that they can have their own business and support themselves. And yeah, that is something that we will try to strengthen. And but that is how we, and also we're working like I was thinking about the pathways, because for someone just to come and have his own business, it's like we have to prepare that person for that particular business, or that is why we have to have a proper pathways in terms of the education system. Looking at their skill, the business training skills, so that we can have those, so that, because most of them, like in terms of literacy and numeracy that I've mentioned earlier, they have challenges on that. So we have to train them, and so we have to have the proper education system in place, those pathways, so there is no barrier from birth or from until he does he goes to heaven. But if you look at that, if you look at all of us, I mean, everyone can be disabled. For us, when we're gonna get older, you might be looking at me now, and maybe in 20 years' time, I will be sitting on a wheelchair, something like that. So we need to we need to have a proper system in place, so that it can support those kind of initiatives.
I think just my 2 points in terms of privatizing services in care. I don't think we want to reach a point where the government or anyone has no control in terms of the kinds of investments that are happening. I am always of the view that there has to be some government buy-in, because when you privatize it, we have to also look at our context, kind of like what I started with. Where are people at in terms of income? Are they able to even afford the services right now? Some of it are public. Are they even able to afford healthcare right now? So when you privatize services, what's the goal? What's the goal that you're trying to? Is it quality work, quality care services, or is it then centered more on business? So I think that one is when you talk about the conversation of privatization, I think we can't allude to it. It will come. It's just making sure that we even ready to have that for people. And the other thing is, will they be able to afford it? Then it defeats the purpose, right? And then the other thing is, I think I just lost my train of thought. Oh yes. If we are going to do some form of privatization, right, it has to have legal frameworks in place. So it doesn't matter if company A, B, or C comes into Fiji, the legal mechanism and framework is there so that they follow process, because you don't want to reach a point where it's just a business hungry driven services, and then the whole component of care and making sure that the services reaches the people that need it, they don't actually access it. So it defeats the purpose. And I'm just reminded of like a good example of government working with private companies, and maybe the assistant minister can correct me. I just thought of the kidney hub. So the kidney hub is like 250 per dialysis, and then you have to have a surgery. I forgot the medical term for it, catheter, right? So it's about 2,000 to 3,000. So what had happened is a lot of people need some sort of kidney dialysis, but they don't have the money. So government does some sort of subsidies. So they able to cover like, I think 75% of the cost. So that's an example of how private company or business works with government. But I don't want to reach a point where it's totally just a business and then people cannot access. So I come in with that. I think context is important. And I think if we have the legal framework and mechanism, it doesn't matter who comes in because it's already there. It safeguards the people who are accessing the services and those that are delivering.
Sorry, just to add on that, I just think of something. We have a mechanism in place. For example, in the communities, we have our OPDs. They have their representatives in these different communities. And they also have the government arm. We have the district committees. The district committees, which is chaired by the provincial administrators, and through the Department of Social Welfare as its secretary, and the members includes all the OPDs and plus other relevant government agencies within that district. For example, in Levuka, you talk about Ovalau. Ovalau, the PA Ovalau looks after that committee and all those different agencies, government agencies. So it's very easy for a person with disability just to go to them in terms of business, in terms of what other needs there. So the support system is there. So the support system there in the committee. As I've mentioned, that it's the only thing that we just have to strengthen and just do more advocacy, and so that the awareness that it is there, but it is working, it's there. Thank you.
I'll turn it on, that will work. Thank you. Okay, I think we could keep going. This has been a full 90 minutes, which has passed relatively quickly. We haven't even really started on childcare. I was driving down the road to Damodar. I counted 3 private care facilities on that road. So privatization is coming, but we need standards in place to assure of safety, dignity, and so forth. So next steps are we're going to, we have a research project that's ongoing, and we're looking to have a Fiji dialogue in consultation and collaboration with our partners here, and that will be in September. So we're just one part of this care economy discussion that's happening. There are many players in this, and it's important that this is a big tent approach to such a sticky challenge that's facing the region and facing Fiji in particular. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to everyone for your attention, for your questions. And in particular, I would like to say thank you to the Assistant Minister Sashi Karan. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to have you here and hear your thoughts. Mr. Lemeki Takinlau, thank you very much. It's been, as always, a pleasure. And Ms. Lisa Volatale from Fiji Women's Rights Movement. Thank you, Lisa. It's always a delight to work with you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
I think we'll look for that. Thank you very much.
Regarding the and talking about how we have represented, like they can't come to the hospital, so you send out for the hospital. Home visit. My uncle is at home. Yeah, in
You can tell that.
we can take him, but we always take white Kayla, and then we slowly gone one Kayla, and then after that, yeah, no, I'm asking, what they follow, so when we do home visit. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I thought that you guys. I have another question. I don't know if you can regarding the medication. So my uncle is born. He can't walk, he can't talk, he can't do anything. So we used to do before is we go to the doctor because they have information. So we tell them, oh, we need medication for him, and they used to give before. But then now they tell us to go get a number. Then I'm going to school. My parents, like we are working and stuff. So if someone he stays at home with my another disabled, his mother. So like we can they tell us the number, wait for 4 hours, and then we go to the doctor, tell the doctor to give us a prescription, and then when we see a call, they say this is the prescription. Yeah. Okay. No, we don't take him for the and they tell us when he's the prescription, like the medication finished. Yes. Yes. So it's like an inconvenience. I mean, I feel bad saying it because my uncle shouldn't be saying that, but we have to get the number. Then wait 4 hours to be seen finally. Then we are given the
Bulavnaka, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to our last session of day 2 of the Pacific Update. I'm very thrilled to be chairing this last session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ryan Edwards. I'm from the ANU and part of the organising committee here for the conference. Not here, but there, coming here. And what's cool about this session is this is the Pacific Update, and every time we do have an update, we try to actually have a session that is essentially giving an economic update. We've had a bit of a political one this morning, and this one here focused on the Fijian economy is intended with that very much in mind. We try and bring this to all of our update events, whether it be the Pacific, the PNG, all of our different updates that we do from ANU. So today we've got 3 different speakers bringing very different perspectives. We firstly will have Janesh Sami from USP in the economics department here, giving us a brief economic update on some new data since the election. Then we'll have Lagi Fisher from the Financial Management Councils Association of Fiji. The acronym I'm not going to try and get the normal pronunciation right for. And he'll be talking about agri-value chain financing with talking about solutions for scale limitations in Fiji. As most of us know, scale is the real challenge here. And the last speaker will be Fantasha Lockington from the Fiji Hotel and Tourism Association, talking about the post-COVID tourism recovery in Fiji. So, and ending the day on hopefully some good news. We'll see. With that, I don't want to say too much more. I don't have a very cool anecdote to tell like my colleague Grant did on the very first session in this room yesterday. So I'll hand over to Janesh to get us started. We'll have 20 minutes for each presentation, and then again, we'll ask you to hold your questions and do a Q&A at the end. So please join me in welcoming Janesh.
This one. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you guys. So I'll be talking briefly about Fiji's economy post 2022 election. But a big part of my discussion will be on the challenges and what some necessary reforms are necessary in the upcoming budget to provide a basis for social and economic prosperity. If you're looking at Fiji's economy from an historical perspective, a 3-party coalition government, along with the higher debt level, has actually put Fiji's economy in a very difficult position. So if you're looking at Fiji's economy, you have numerous challenges post-COVID. One of them is you have a massive amount of skilled migration happening, right? So that creates a bigger problem as far as supporting economic growth is concerned. We have lost about $3 to $4 billion of revenue by giving tax giveaways, right? So these things actually put a lot of pressure on public finance and our capacity to respond to adverse external shocks. However, one of the important things that we have here is window of opportunity to reset the economy. So the 2023-24 budget actually is the starting point. If the government is able to find a mix of well-developed policies, it can provide necessary support. If you're looking at global growth, right, so we would expect growth to come down a bit to 2.8% in 2023, but that goes alongside with the existing vulnerabilities to natural disasters and sluggish private sector growth. So Reserve Bank recently forecasted that the growth for 2023 will be about 8%. But I think the growth for Fiji's economy in 2023 will be above 9%. Now, there are two reasons why I said that we can expect a 9% growth rate in 2023. The first reason is because the private sector has been quite reluctant to spend. They're waiting for the budget. So if the budget is able to provide the right set of policies, you would see massive investment taking place, which will take our growth forward. The second reason is we have still 6 months left. And if we are able to boost visa arrivals by a significant percent, I'll talk that about in a while, we'll achieve a growth rate of more than 9% in 2023. So going forward, the focus of the 2023-24 budget should be on sustainable, inclusive, and resilient economic recovery. Now, this is very difficult to achieve given the current debt levels that we have, but we need necessary reforms in the upcoming budget to provide some basis for that. Now, one of the things which I would want to maintain here is if you're looking at 2023-24, we would expect the growth rates to come down, which means we need to target more than 5% growth rate from 2023 onwards, right? And that is, again, the biggest challenge, because if you look at the historical growth rate, if you look at, for example, 2015 to 2019, the growth rate was 3.1%. If you look at past 10 years, the growth rate was about 3% as well. So if past is any indication, growth rate of 3% is what we have had. Getting a growth rate of more than 5% will be a bigger challenge for Fiji's economy. Now, that is possible if we have necessary reforms in the private sector. We are able to bring about diversification in the tourism sector, because these two things can significantly drive economic growth. And now here we would want to assume that we are lucky and we don't have any adverse external shocks. So I would expect recovery of the economy by end or mid of 2024. I know there's some discussion about when the economy is going to recover. I'm a bit optimistic that we are going to recover by 2024. So that's a positive sign. If you're looking at tourism sector, that's one of the high growth sectors where we have massive potential. I would expect the tourism sector to have full recovery by end of this year. So that's really good news for the tourism sector and all other sectors that are directly or indirectly related. However, there are a number of challenges for the tourism sector which the government needs to seriously consider in the upcoming budget. And these includes addressing labor shortages, looking at marketing. So one of the ways to look at it is we need to attract more visitors. We need to make them stay longer and make them spend more, right? So we have 6 months ahead. And if you really look at tourism sector, we need to be innovative in terms of our approach. And if we are able to increase visa arrivals in a range of more than 5 to 10% compared to what we did in before the pandemic, because we have 6 months lying ahead. If you're able to increase visa arrivals on a monthly basis by 5 to 10%, we will receive an estimated $2 billion in 2023, right? So if you look at the historical data on tourism earnings, this $2 billion is not a new finding, right? So if we are able to address the current existing challenges in the tourism sector, you can expect $2 billion of foreign earnings by end of 23. And if you're looking at room occupancy rates, These are very crude indicators, but they do indicate that we can bring more visitors to the country. Right, so I'll briefly look at some of the indicators. If you're looking at lending for consumption and investment purpose, that reflects improved confidence following the election. Low interest rates on new lending by commercial banks would actually support economic growth. And the export data actually reflects some extent of recovery. Remittances again has grown significantly over the years, right? But the challenge for the government is to modernize seasonal worker programs to ensure that we have rapid growth in remittances, but we are also able to deal with the local labor shortages. So you need to have a sustainable approach to dealing with seasonal worker programs. So we are losing people, but we're also receiving money. So you need to strike a balance, and that's where the challenge is. If you're looking at the labor market, so this is one interesting indicator that we can use. The businesses have been somewhat cautious in terms of the hiring. And I think there are two reasons for that. One reason is because they're awaiting for the next budget. The second reason is because some of the discussions that we have had about minimum wage, right? So if they're not sure whether the wage rates are going to go up, right, they are going to hold on to their hiring decisions. So this budget should be about providing the much needed certainty to the business sector, so they're able to invest in the country, right? Now, how do you deal with inflation? Inflation is going to be an ongoing challenge. The average monthly inflation rate in 2022 was about 4.2%. And this is not going to change significantly over the years. So coming forward in the next few years, inflation is still going to be a challenge for Fiji's economy. Now, how do you deal with it? One of the ways to deal with this is to consider that when you are developing the next budget. The second way is to have an independent analysis of inflation, right? If any one of you have read the fiscal review report, which is a quite comprehensive report, it looks at so many issues, but what's interesting about that report, it provides you dynamics about so much things about public finance. We need a similar in-depth analysis of inflation because there are many dynamics of inflation we are not looking at. For example, shipping costs, which is an important factor, right? The other thing is overpricing that happens in the supermarket. So the government, the major challenge for the government in the first 2 years or even the first 6 months, we still have 6 months, is to set up an independent committee to have a detailed evidence-based analysis of inflation. Because for the most of our economic history, we have been saying, oh, we have imported inflation, there's nothing we can do. We have to have smarter policies which are backed by data that will allow us effectively to deal with inflation. Right, here is the problem. The problem is that as of January 2023, our public debt stands at around $9.5 billion. As of 31st May 2023, our public debt ratio is about 85% of GDP. 85% of GDP is a bad number, exceptionally high for a Pacific Island country, right? The problem here is that in 10 years' time, our debt ratio will be 100%, right? Which basically means with 100% debt ratio, we won't be able to respond to any adverse external shock. So if there's a natural disaster, which will become more vulnerable, right? We know that climate change is a very serious issue in the Pacific. We can realistically expect more cyclones in the region in the upcoming years. So with 100% public debt ratio in the next 10 years, we won't be in a position to respond to these kinds of external shocks. Now, we can borrow, but that will create the problem, make the problem much worse, right? So the government has very limited capacity to borrow. The government has very limited control on whatever grant it gets from our development partners. It's beyond the control of the government, okay, to influence the amount that we are going to get from the donor countries, right? So what is necessary in this budget is a reset, which means we need to take some serious actions. Some serious policy reforms are necessary in the 2023 budget. So we are able to avoid very difficult choices that we have to make in next few years. So we can delay the decision, right? Or we can make more difficult decisions in the future. So we need to strike that balance, ease that transition by taking some serious measures in this budget. Right, so I want to talk about this $204 million. In 2023, right, the coalition government paid $204 million just in interest payment. I'm not counting the principal. I'm only looking at the interest. Now that's exceptionally large. The amount the government spends on social welfare is around 125 million. But the amount we are spending in the first 6 months on paying interest is 204 million. So there is the opportunity cost. The health sector needs an additional $150 million, right? That's the seriousness of the problem. But we are spending around $204 million just on interest. Forget the principal. So all these indicators tells us that we need a realistic budget. The realistic budget here doesn't mean that you increase the tax significantly, but it means you have to consider the fiscal position of the government, what is likely to happen in the future. Right, so there are some commendable achievements. I've not noted, wrote all those that, but I think the National Economic Summit during the day and GCC, these are very important positive developments in Fiji's economy, right? So if you look at Fiji's economy for the past 5 years, and if you look at these three developments have actually taken the country forward in many aspects, right? So you don't look at GDP and talk about development only, but these positive developments provide the much needed confidence to the private sector. And that's very, very important to fuel a private sector led economic growth. However, there are some problems, right? And the problem lies in misinformation of policies. So the coalition government needs a robust, rigorous communication policy to deal with misinformation that is possible. The other thing is, I think the government is trying to be very transparent, right? The government is trying to be transparent. It's trying to consult, but when you become too transparent, right, it opens up windows of unnecessary criticism. So the government can do better if it comes up with a robust communication strategy. You need to be very careful when you're making public policy statements. Right, so I think this is one area which the government can deal with. We have a new government still in